Two shapes lay in the snow that morning. A frail golden retriever, nothing but bones and trembling breath, curled around a blind shepherd puppy who couldn't even see the world trying to take him. They were never meant to survive the night. No one was looking for them. No one even knew they were there. And miles away, a Navy SEAL walked through the same frozen forest, a man running from memories louder than gunfire, searching for a reason, any reason, to keep moving forward. No one believed he could save anything, least of all himself. But when he knelt beneath that ancient tree and felt the weak heartbeat of a dog who refused to die alone, something inside him cracked open like ice under sunrise. What happened next will make you believe that broken souls can still find each other, and that winter sometimes delivers miracles to those who've lost hope. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. The final days of December settled over Willow Bend like a long sigh, soft and silver, as if the world itself were preparing to turn a page. Snow clung to the pine branches in thick, unmoving layers, and the air tasted faintly of iron and ice. Not far from the frozen lake, a narrow trail wound through a stand of cedar trees toward an old cabin with a slanted roof and a chimney that rarely smoked anymore. This was where Cole Harrison chose to disappear. Cole, 38, carried the unmistakable bearing of a man shaped by discipline and storms, broad-shouldered, tall, with a posture that had once been unbreakable. His face bore sharp, angular lines, a square jaw shadowed by a late-day stubble, cheekbones that looked carved rather than grown, and eyes of deep slate blue that seldom gave away what he felt. A faint scar curved beneath the right eye, the kind a medic might have patched up in the middle of a sandstorm. His short, dark brown hair, streaked with premature gray, spoke of nights spent awake rather than years lived. He walked like someone who no longer expected safety, someone who had learned to carry silence as if it were part of his uniform. Cole had come home from the Navy SEALs months earlier, though home was a word he no longer understood. The town had changed, or maybe he had. People greeted him politely at the general store, but their voices softened in that careful way people use around someone they fear might break. Cole didn't blame them. War had a way of etching distance into the faces of those who survived it. Now, he lived alone in the cabin by the lake, repairing tools for neighbors, chopping his own firewood, and pretending the quiet was enough. But on this late December evening, the quiet felt heavier than usual. The town beyond the tree line shimmered with preparations for the new year. Silver and blue lights wrapped around lampposts, glowing softly through the snow. Children's laughter drifted faintly from the main square, where a temporary stage was being built for the midnight countdown. Cole watched those lights sometimes from afar, standing at the edge of the forest, as though approaching them too closely might reopen wounds he had spent months trying to seal. Just after dusk, with the temperature slipping below freezing, Cole stepped outside to gather more firewood. The cold bit through the fabric of his worn flannel shirt and thick coat, but he welcomed it. The sting reminded him he was still here, still capable of feeling something. His breath emerged in visible clouds as he trudged toward the woodpile behind the cabin. The snow muffled everything except the soft crunch beneath his boots and the occasional creak of a distant pine. He had just lifted the first log when a faint sound, thin, trembling, almost like a whimper swallowed by wind, reached his ears. Cole froze, listening. Another sound followed, softer, but unmistakably distressed. He straightened, the old instincts rising, alert, scanning the darkness, searching for movement. Even in the stillness of winter, something was alive out there. He set the log aside and followed the sound down a narrow path that cut between the trees. The snow deepened past his ankles, and the air thickened with the smell of pine sap and cold earth. After several yards, he saw a dark shape hunched beneath a towering evergreen. As he approached, the shape shifted, barely, weakly. Then he saw them. A dog lay curled at the base of the tree, its golden fur dulled by dirt and ice, its ribs showing sharply beneath the coat. A golden retriever, but so thin it looked carved from winter itself. The dog was shivering violently, breath shallow, eyes half closed, and pressed tightly into the shelter of its chest was a puppy, tiny, no more than 5 weeks old, its black and tan fur stiff with frost. The little German Shepherd pup did not even react to Cole's presence. Its eyes, clouded and unfocused, stared into nothing. Cole knelt slowly in the snow, his breath catching. He had seen suffering before, more of it than any man deserved. But something about this, two small creatures clinging to each other beneath a dying tree, unsettled him in a way he wasn't ready for. The golden retriever lifted its head just enough to look at him. Its eyes were warm but hollow, the eyes of a creature that had tried far too long to survive alone. It made no effort to flee or growl. Instead, it pressed closer around the puppy, as if shielding it from the world. Even now, Cole reached a gloved hand forward and touched the dog's head gently. The reaction was immediate. A faint tremor, a whine so soft it barely rose above the wind. The dog wasn't asking for help. It was apologizing for needing it. Something twisted inside him. "Easy," Cole murmured, his voice quieter than the falling snow. He examined the pup next. Its breathing was weak, its small body cold against its fingertips. When he waved a hand gently beside its eyes, it didn't blink. Blind, likely from birth. Abandoned, maybe. Lost, certainly. Cole's jaw tightened. He thought of the times he had carried wounded teammates through storms of sand and fire, the weight of their trust pressing into his bones. He thought of the one he couldn't carry, the one memory he tried to outrun each sleepless night. The forest around him blurred for a moment, the way sight sometimes blurred in combat when emotion rose too fast. He exhaled sharply, gathering himself. The golden retriever nudged his arm weakly, as if sensing the flicker inside him. Cole looked down at the dog's fragile body. Whoever had left them here, if they had been left, had given them no chance. But somehow, they had survived long enough to be found. The world didn't usually offer second chances like that. Cole slid one arm beneath the retriever, surprised at how light it was. The dog whimpered, but did not resist. With his other arm, he scooped up the puppy, holding it close to the warmth of his chest. The tiny creature trembled faintly, burying its face into his coat. He rose slowly, the weight of both animals cradled against him. Snowflakes drifted down, catching in his hair and beard. For a brief moment, the forest seemed to exhale, the wind softening as though the trees themselves acknowledged what had just changed. Cole looked toward the cabin, its windows glowing faintly through the trees like distant lanterns. The cold bitterness of solitude he had carried for so long thinned slightly, just enough for warmth to slip in. He didn't understand why these two creatures had been placed in his path tonight, but he felt, deep in the bruised chambers of his heart, that walking away was no longer an option. He tightened his hold and began the slow walk back through the snow, each step deliberate, careful. As he neared the cabin door, the golden retriever shifted in his arms, pressing its head against his chest with a faint, grateful sigh. Cole paused, startled by how deeply that small gesture pierced him. Two fragile lives, trusting him without question. He wasn't sure he deserved that, but as he stepped inside the cabin and the warmth began to wrap around them, Cole realized something he had not felt in a long time. These two weren't merely being saved by him. They were, in some quiet and impossible way, reaching back to save him too. And in the dim glow of the cabin's lantern light, as snow kept falling across Willow Bend, Cole understood that whatever happened next, he was no longer walking alone into the new year. The morning after, Cole found the two dogs arrived gray and muted, a sky washed in pale winter light. The cold had settled deeper overnight, turning the cabin windows opaque with delicate frost. Cole barely slept. Each time he closed his eyes, he felt again the trembling weight of the golden retriever in his arms and the small, fragile heartbeat of the blind puppy pressed to his chest. When dawn finally seeped through the tree line, he knew he had no choice but to seek help. The old veterinary clinic near the town square was the only place equipped to assess their condition. He wrapped both dogs gently in an old wool blanket before loading them into his truck. The golden retriever tucked its nose toward the pup protectively, and the puppy, still unresponsive to movement or shifting light, leaned into that warmth as though it were the only world it recognized. Cole glanced at them several times during the short drive, unable to shake the strange pressure tightening in his sternum. They were strangers, yet somehow not, as if some part of him understood exactly what it meant to cling to another life for survival. The streets of Willow Bend hummed with quiet preparations for the New Year's Eve countdown. Workers strung strings of blue and silver lights between lampposts, their breath fogging in the chilled air. A pair of college volunteers hammered down stakes for a community fire pit. Even the bakery on Main Street, run by Mrs. Patterson, a tall woman with salt and pepper hair and a habit of shouting cheerful greetings, whether people wanted them or not, seemed brighter, its windows fogged from early morning ovens. Cole felt himself standing apart from it all, like someone glancing into a life that no longer included him. Dr. Eleanor Hayes's clinic sat at the edge of the square, a restored brick building with a green door and an aging wooden sign that read, Hayes Veterinary Care. Cole pushed the door open, letting in a gust of cold air. A small bell chimed overhead. Eleanor appeared moments later from the back room, wiping her hands on a faded blue apron. She was in her mid-60s, though the fine lines around her eyes carried more wisdom than age. Her hair, silver gray, with soft waves, was pulled loosely into a low bun. Her posture was straight, but her movements gentle, deliberate, as if she believed the world responded better to softness than hurry. Her face had the quiet beauty of someone who had once endured love and loss with equal strength. "Well now," she said when she spotted the dogs in Cole's arms. Her voice had a warmth that softened the edges of even the coldest morning. "You look like you walked out of a storm carrying secrets." Cole cleared his throat, uncomfortable with observations that felt too close. "Found them near my place. They're not in good shape." Eleanor approached, her eyes narrowing with practiced empathy. "Let's get them inside." She led him to an examination room painted in calming shades of cream and forest green. Cole laid the dogs carefully on a padded table. The retriever tried to stand, but collapsed almost immediately, exhausted. Eleanor steadied it with one hand. "Well, sweetheart," she murmured to the dog, "let's see what you've been carrying alone." She examined the retriever first. Up close, she looked even thinner. Hips jutting, fur matted with mud and ice, pads cracked from the cold. Eleanor's brow furrowed, but she didn't speak until she finished her assessment. "Malnourished," she said softly. "Exhaustion, dehydration, but she has fight in her. That's good." Cole exhaled, only then realizing he'd been holding his breath. Next, Eleanor turned to the puppy. She handled it with a tenderness that surprised Cole. Her fingertips barely brushed its small frame as she checked reflexes, breathing, responsiveness. When she waved a small penlight gently across the puppy's face, there was no reaction, not even a blink. Eleanor sighed. It was the kind of sigh people give when they already know the truth but wish they didn't. "He's blind, Cole. Likely from birth. His eyes never formed enough to sense light." Cole nodded slowly, staring at the puppy. Something inside him shifted, like an old wound stirring in winter. "Can he survive?" "Yes," she answered, "but not alone." Her gaze moved to the retriever, who, even in exhaustion, kept inching closer to the puppy. That one's been guiding him, keeping him warm, making sure he knows where she is. Without her, he wouldn't have lasted another night. Cole looked between them, absorbing the weight of what she said. The idea of separating the two felt wrong, unnatural, like tearing two halves of a story apart before the ending. Eleanor stepped back, removing her gloves. They're bonded, deeply. It's rare to see it happen this strongly with animals that aren't related. But trauma has a way of tying lives together. She paused, eyes softening, as if a memory passed behind them. "I learned that a long time ago." Cole had heard whispers around town that Eleanor had once been married to a decorated army soldier, a man who returned from deployment only to succumb to his injuries months later. He'd never asked, but he saw the truth in her expression now. The quiet resilience of someone who had carried grief and chosen kindness anyway. "They'll need warmth, food, rest," Eleanor continued, "and someone patient enough to help them heal at their own pace." Cole swallowed. He knew exactly what she meant, and he felt that same tightening in his chest again, the one he'd felt in the forest. Eleanor didn't press, but she did glance at him with a knowing softness. "Sometimes," she said, "the ones we save end up saving us back." Cole looked away sharply, unprepared for how those words hit him. Outside the exam room, the clinic's waiting area filled with soft chatter. Neighbors making small talk about the year ending, the countdown celebration tonight, the hope that a fresh start might clear old shadows. Cole wondered if the idea of a new year meant anything to him anymore. The man he used to be felt as distant as the explosions he still heard in his dreams. Eleanor gave the dogs warm blankets and a shallow bowl of water to lap from. The retriever drank in slow, cautious sips, never letting the puppy out of reach. The pup, though blind, seemed to sense her presence, pressing its nose into her chest fur with a faint whine. Watching them, Cole felt something fragile shift inside him. He wasn't sure if it was guilt, longing, or the faint spark of something he had nearly forgotten how to feel. "They don't have names yet?" Eleanor asked gently. Cole shook his head. Didn't feel right naming them before knowing if they'd make it. Eleanor gave a small, understanding smile. Names come when the heart is ready. There's no rush. He nodded. I'll take them home. Keep them warm. See what happens. Eleanor rested a hand briefly on his shoulder. You're doing more than you think. The comment lingered with him as he carried both dogs back to his truck. The retriever lifted its head just enough to glance at him, a flicker of trust glowing within exhausted eyes. The puppy curled deeper into its protector's fur, blind, but somehow no longer lost. As Cole started the engine, snow began to fall again, light, silent flakes drifting through the morning. Willow Bend gleamed under strings of silver and blue lights, ready for the new year. Cole felt far from the celebration, but not as far as yesterday. Something had begun to shift. Something small, but real. And as he drove toward the cabin with the two dogs resting atop the blanket beside him, he sensed, for the first time in a long while, that he was not returning to his empty home alone. Two unnamed souls had entered his life, and somehow he understood that their story had just begun. The last morning of the year rose gently over Willow Bend, painting the frost-covered trees with a pale blush of gold. The cabin felt warmer than it had in months, not because of the old wood stove, though it crackled softly, but because Cole Harrison was no longer alone inside it. The two dogs slept bundled together on a folded quilt near the hearth, their breaths rising in small, synchronized puffs. For a moment, Cole watched them in silence, absorbing the strange peace they brought, a peace he had not expected, nor believed he deserved. The golden retriever stirred first, lifting its thin head to check on the tiny German shepherd pup nestled against its chest. The puppy, still blind and fragile, nudged closer, nose pressed into the older dog's ribs, as if reading the world through warmth alone. Cole gently crouched beside them, noticing again the subtle way the retriever shifted to accommodate the puppy's movements. Protective, patient, almost parental. He had seen soldiers care for each other in war zones with the same unspoken devotion. After feeding them, Cole wrapped himself in his heavy winter jacket and prepared to return to Eleanor Hayes's clinic. She had asked if he could lend a hand over the next few days. The influx of travelers visiting relatives for New Year's meant the clinic was unusually busy. Cole didn't mind the work. It gave him structure, something steady to hold on to. He loaded the dogs into the passenger seat once more, the retriever settling carefully so the puppy could lean against its foreleg. The short drive into town carried a hush, unusual even for winter, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind pushing snow from branches. Willow Bend was stirring when Cole arrived. At the edge of the square, a few locals were assembling a tall pine pole decorated with silver ribbons for the evening's festivities. Among them was Michael Turner, a middle-aged electrician with a stocky build, sand-colored beard, and weary hazel eyes. Michael was known for fixing anything with wires and for laughing too loudly at his own jokes. But today, he looked understated, wearing a thick denim jacket and gloves patched at the knuckles. He greeted Cole with a nod, respectful, slightly cautious. Michael had a brother who served overseas and rarely spoke about it, and that quiet connection made him gentler with Cole than most. "Morning, Harrison," he said. "Saw you carrying those dogs yesterday. Word travels faster than weather in this town." Cole managed a small half-smile. "Yeah, they needed help." Michael glanced at the blanket where the dogs rested. "You've got a good heart, even if you pretend you don't." He lifted a coil of lights onto his shoulder and turned back to his work, leaving the comment floating in the chilled air, like a truth Cole wasn't ready to claim. Inside the clinic, Eleanor greeted him with her reassuring warmth. She wore a soft gray sweater beneath her lab coat, her silver hair loosely tied, and carried the serene steadiness of someone who had survived storms without letting them harden her spirit. "Welcome back, Cole. I'm glad you're here. Holidays always bring more surprises than I care for." The waiting area was already filling. On one bench sat a teenager with braces and a jittery terrier that kept trying to crawl into his jacket. Across from them, an older man with a thick wool cap held a fat orange cat who looked mildly offended at the world. Cole helped assist with weighing animals, fetching supplies, and reassuring anxious owners. It was the kind of work that demanded presence but not vulnerability, a balance Cole appreciated. During a brief lull, Eleanor joined him near the counter. "How are the little ones doing?" Cole glanced at the dogs resting near his feet. "Better. The older one barely sleeps unless the pup's touching her." Eleanor's eyes softened. Some bonds aren't born, they're shaped by what's survived. He nodded silently, feeling more seen than he expected. Later that afternoon, after finishing his shift, Cole returned to the cabin with the dogs. The sun hung low, bleeding pale gold through the trees, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. Inside the cabin, he knelt beside the quilt and watched the two dogs settle in. The retriever curled protectively, while the puppy, he still couldn't get used to how small it was, reached out instinctively, feeling for the reassurance of that familiar fur. A thought tugged at Cole, soft at first, then persistent. "You two need names," he murmured. He had resisted naming them before. Names made things real, tethered them to him in ways he wasn't sure he could manage. But now, watching the faint winter light catch in the retriever's tired eyes and the puppy's quiet determination to navigate a world it could not see, he felt a stirring of certainty. "You," he said to the retriever, brushing a hand through its thinning golden fur, "are a harbor. That's what you've been for him. A safe place, a place to return to." The dog blinked slowly, leaning into his touch. "Harbor," Cole repeated, tasting the name. "It fits." He turned to the puppy next. Its eyes, though unfocused and milky, held an earnestness that defied its frail body. The little creature tilted its head slightly at the sound of his voice, as if trying to locate him. "And you," Cole whispered, "are a whisper. Small, quiet, but somehow stronger than the world that tried to forget you." He exhaled, surprised by how right the name felt. "Whisper it is." For a moment, the cabin held a stillness that seemed sacred, as if the names themselves had settled into the room and claimed their space in the story unfolding. As evening approached, Cole heated a pot of stew and allowed himself to breathe more deeply than he had in months. Harbor occasionally lifted her head to check on Whisper, who was curled tightly against her belly. Their bond was unmistakable, not merely instinctual, but forged through hardship. Two souls who had chosen not to face the cold alone. The wind outside rose, brushing against the cabin walls like fingers tapping for attention. Cole stepped to the window. The blue and silver lights in the distance flickered softly as townsfolk finalized preparations for the New Year's Eve celebration. He wondered briefly if he should attend, but the thought stirred something complicated in him. He was not ready for crowds, not ready for soft questions from kind strangers, not ready to pretend that the past year had not hollowed something vital inside him. But when he turned back to Harbor and Whisper, He felt the faintest pull toward possibility. Maybe healing didn't require standing among crowds. Maybe it started in small, almost invisible steps, like naming two animals who had stumbled into his life. Harbor shifted, resting her chin atop Whisper's tiny head. Whisper's tail flicked once, a delicate, instinctive movement filled with trust. The sight tightened Cole's throat unexpectedly. "You two," he murmured, "belong together." And the words felt like a truth, larger than the moment they occupied. Something deeper than coincidence, something close to fate. Harbor and Whisper. Not just names, not just animals, but a pair shaped by winter and loss and chance. And perhaps now, by him. Their story, like the approaching new year, was beginning to unfold with quiet purpose. The first day of the new year arrived wrapped in a quiet, pearly haze that settled over Willow Bend like a blessing the town hadn't yet earned. The snowdrifts glowed faintly beneath a pale sky, and the crisp air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. Cole Harrison spent the morning splitting logs behind his cabin, grateful for the honest rhythm of the axe. The thud of wood meeting steel helped silence the thoughts that had begun to tangle inside him ever since he had named Harbor and Whisper. Harbor, though still thin and recovering, had become stronger over the last few days. Her fur, once dull from neglect, had begun to soften with warmth and regular meals. She walked with more confidence. Her posture no longer collapsed in defeat, but lifted with gentle purpose. Whisper, the blind pup, stuck close to her side, following the steady sound of her paws with trust that felt almost sacred. By late morning, Cole drove them into town again, partly for supplies and partly because Eleanor had asked him to stop by. The clinic was quieter than usual when he arrived. A few holiday decorations still clung to the windows, paper snowflakes and faded blue ribbons. But most townsfolk were gathered at the center square, where workers were constructing the ice rink for the festival that night. Eleanor greeted Cole with a subdued look he didn't immediately understand. She pushed her glasses up her nose, a habit she had whenever she was hesitant about something. "Cole," she began gently, "there's something we need to talk about." Cole felt a tightening in his gut. What happened? Eleanor nodded toward her office. "Come inside." He followed her in, with Harbor and Whisper pacing close at his heels. The older dog stopped just inside the doorway and sat protectively beside the pup. Eleanor noticed and gave them both a sad smile before turning serious again. A family from Cedarbrook applied for adoption. They're well off. Big fenced yard, stable home, 2 teenage kids who grew up with dogs. She paused. They want Harbor. Cole's shoulders stiffened. Just Harbor? Eleanor nodded. Not Whisper. They're concerned about the commitment of raising a blind dog. Cole's face hardened. The room felt suddenly colder, as if a winter gust had slipped through the walls. Whisper doesn't go anywhere without her. I know. Eleanor's voice softened. But the shelter is under pressure. They think Harbor has a good chance at a better life if she's adopted quickly. Cole stared at her, jaw tightening. You're saying they want to separate them? I'm saying, Eleanor said carefully, they don't see another option, and they're asking for your opinion. Cole felt something inside him recoil. He remembered the forest, the freezing air, the thin body of the retriever curled around a pup whose world was nothing but darkness. He remembered how Harbor never walked more than 3 steps without looking back, how Whisper reached for her with small blind paws whenever she drifted too far. The idea of tearing them apart felt wrong in a way he couldn't even articulate. "I don't think that should happen," he said. Before Eleanor could answer, the clinic door opened, and a woman stepped in, brushing snowflakes from her jacket. She was in her early 40s, tall and elegantly dressed in a cream wool coat and dark jeans tucked into suede boots. Her dark auburn hair fell in smooth waves to her shoulders, framing a refined face with thoughtful brown eyes. She carried herself with the poised confidence of someone used to making decisions for her household. "Mr. Harrison?" she asked softly. Cole nodded, wary. "I'm Laura Bennett," she said. "My family is the one considering Harbor." Laura extended her hand, and Cole shook it, noting the gentle firmness of her grip. She wasn't cold or dismissive. Her eyes were remarkably kind, but beneath that kindness was a tension he recognized, someone torn between generosity and practicality. "We were moved by her story," Laura continued. "We lost our old retriever this past spring. My daughter has been struggling with the grief. We thought maybe Harbor could heal some of that." Cole softened slightly. He understood grief that reached children, but Laura's gaze fell briefly to Whisper, who trembled slightly at the unfamiliar voices. Harbor nudged the pup reassuringly. Laura exhaled. "We can't take both. Our schedule, the kids' activities, our home setup. It wouldn't be fair to a blind dog. We're not equipped." Cole's chest tightened. "They come as a pair." Laura swallowed. "The shelter told us you haven't committed to keeping them together." Cole didn't answer. He wasn't ready to admit anything out loud. Eleanor stepped in gently. "Why don't we let you spend a little time with Harbor, just to see how she responds?" Laura nodded gratefully. "That would help." Cole reluctantly unclipped Harbor's collar, and Eleanor led Laura and the retriever outside into the open space behind the clinic. Whisper whined instantly, sensing Harbor's absence, and Cole knelt to steady him. The puppy pressed against his leg, tiny heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. Minutes later, Harbor returned through the back door with Laura. She walked politely beside the woman, tail wagging faintly, trusting, but not connected. Laura smiled, hopeful. "She's wonderful." Cole glanced down at Whisper, whose small body shook with confusion and fear. Harbor seemed to notice the trembling instantly. Her ears perked, and she stepped toward the pup. But as Laura gently pulled her toward the exit, Whisper let out a thin, frightened cry. Something broke in Harbor. The retriever planted her paws, pulled free from Laura's hold, and bolted. The leash slipped through Laura's fingers. Harbor sprinted back into the room, sliding slightly on the tile floor, and threw herself between Whisper and the unknown world. Her body curved protectively around the pup, head lowered, eyes locked on Laura. Not aggressive, but undeniably unwilling to leave. Whisper pressed desperately into Harbor's chest, trembling harder until Harbor nuzzled the top of his head with a soft, urgent whine. The room went quiet. Laura's hand slowly dropped to her side, her face folding into a mix of understanding and resignation. "I see," she whispered. "They can't be separated." Cole finally met her gaze. "No," he said quietly. "They can't." Laura nodded once, sadness touching her features, but her voice remained respectful. "Then we won't move forward. They belong together." She offered Cole a gentle smile. "Take good care of them." After she left, Eleanor placed a hand on Cole's arm. "You did right." Cole inhaled deeply, watching Harbor keep her body firmly against Whisper's side. Any thought of separating them evaporated in that moment. Fate, if he believed in such things, had spoken clearly. Whatever came next, Harbor and Whisper would face it together. Cole knew, without doubt, that it would be cruel to force them apart. The afternoon sky hung low over Willow Bend, its pale winter light stretching thin across the rooftops as if the sun itself were tired of carrying the weight of the season. New Year's Eve was approaching, and though the square buzzed with preparations, the mood in Cole Harrison's chest could not have been further from celebration. He walked slowly toward his cabin after leaving the clinic, Harbor and Whisper padding behind him, the larger dog alert and gentle, the puppy trailing with quiet determination as he followed the rhythm of Harbor's paws. Cole had barely reached the porch when his phone buzzed. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. He picked up. "Cole," she said softly. "I just got out of a meeting with the Regional Rescue Board." The tension in her voice carved a cold line down his spine. "What now?" She hesitated, a rarity for someone with her calm expertise. "They've issued an ultimatum, 48 hours. If no one steps up to adopt both Harbor and Whisper together before the new year begins, they'll separate them." Cole felt the air freeze in his lungs. He looked down at Harbor, who immediately looked up in return, her warm amber eyes concerned by the shift in his posture. Whisper, sensing something unsettled, pressed against her front leg and whined faintly. 48 hours? Cole's voice was rough. "That's not enough time." "I know," Eleanor said, her tone tightening with frustration. "I argued it. I pushed back. But they see Harbor's adoption chances dropping each day she isn't placed. They think Whisper's the one holding her back." Cole closed his eyes, jaw tight. "She's not a burden," he muttered. "No," Eleanor agreed, "but not everyone sees it that way." When he ended the call, he stayed on the porch longer than the cold should have allowed. The quiet forest around him felt unusually unforgiving. Harbor nudged his hand gently, sensing his turmoil. Whisper followed her movement, bumping softly into Cole's boot before curling close to Harbor again. He bent down, stroking their fur slowly. "I won't let anything happen to you, either of you." But the words carried uncertainty. Keeping both dogs was a commitment, one that could anchor the loneliness he had carried for years, or one that could break him if he failed them. Yet letting Harbor go would mean tearing Whisper's world apart, and letting Whisper go alone was unthinkable. As evening deepened, Cole drove into town to pick up supplies. The square was lively, with people decorating the ice rink that now shone faintly under strings of blue lanterns. A wooden stage was halfway erected for the countdown celebration. Children skated clumsily while their parents called out encouragements. The world around him was preparing for joy, but his mind was a storm. Inside the general store, shelves had been stocked with sparklers, small fireworks, and festive ribbons. As Cole reached for a pack of firecrackers, more out of distraction than intention, a soft voice spoke from behind him. "Those always made my husband nervous. He'd jump every time they popped." Cole turned to see an elderly woman with silver white hair, neatly pinned into a bun, beneath a knitted hat. She stood with a cane in one hand and a small basket in the other. Her face was wrinkled like a well-loved map, but her eyes, the color of faded denim, held warmth and humor. She wore a long charcoal coat and lavender gloves, the kind hand-stitched with care. "Name's Margaret," she said as she adjusted her grip on the cane. "Most people around here call me Maggie." Cole nodded politely. Cole Harrison. I know, she said with a small smile, not unkindly. In a town this size, news travels quick. You're the one with the 2 lost souls. Cole exhaled slowly. Yeah, that's me. Maggie leaned lightly on her cane, studying him with a perceptiveness that reminded him of Eleanor. You look like a man trying to make a decision he's scared of making. Cole glanced down at the fireworks in his hand. Something like that. Maggie's expression softened. My husband, God rest him, used to say New Year's wasn't about starting over. She paused, letting the memory settle. It was about choosing what was still worth carrying into the next year. Cole swallowed. And how did he choose? With his heart, Maggie said simply, even when it hurt. She gave him a gentle pat on the arm before shuffling toward the counter. Cole watched her go, her slow step steady and full of dignity, and realized her words had struck deeper than she knew. Walking back to the truck, the town lights shimmered with a warmth that felt newly meaningful. But the weight of the 48-hour deadline pressed hard with every breath he took. That night, sleep refused to come. Cole lay awake on the old couch, staring at the wooden ceiling beams, listening to the soft crackling of the stove and the quiet breathing of the 2 dogs at their bed. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Harbor's protective stance when the Bennett family tried to lead her away. He saw Whisper trembling in his arms. He saw the forest, even now, covered in frost that could have easily claimed them both. Sometime close to midnight, a faint sound stirred him. A small shuffling beneath the dim glow of the dying fire. Whisper had woken. The puppy stood unsteadily, his tiny legs wobbling as he sniffed at the air, searching. Harbor was still asleep, her chest rising and falling in slow, exhausted rhythm. Whisper took a hesitant step forward, then another. His nose nudged the rug, then a chair leg, then nothing at all. His breath grew thin with panic. Cole sat up, his heart tightening. Before he could move, Harbor's ears twitched. She lifted her head and made a soft, low sound. A quiet hum, not bark nor whine, but something like a guiding note. Whisper responded instantly, turning toward the sound. He stepped forward, tripped, recovered, and stepped again, following Harbor's breath as if it were the only lantern in the dark. Harbor hummed once more. Whisper located her and pressed himself into the warmth of her chest. Harbor curled around him protectively, letting out a long exhale that sounded almost like relief. Cole watched them from the couch, his chest aching. He placed a hand over his eyes, feeling a pressure he hadn't felt in years. Something old inside him cracked open. Fear, tenderness, guilt, longing, all bleeding together. 48 hours. 48 hours to choose which world he wanted to wake up in. And watching Whisper find Harbor in the dark, he knew the truth he had been resisting since the forest. These two were not meant to survive without each other. He could see it now with painful clarity. Harbor and Whisper weren't just a pair. They were a promise, a life-bound vow shaped in winter. The morning of December 30th unfolded beneath a sky washed in the faint silver of approaching snow, a quiet stillness settling over Willow Bend, as if the town itself were bracing for the final breaths of the year. Cole Harrison stood on the porch of his cabin, the cold air biting into his lungs. Harbor and Whisper resting at his feet. Harbor was alert, tail curled protectively around the small blind pup, whose milky eyes drifted toward whatever warmth he sensed. Their bond felt stronger with each passing hour, and the weight of the 48-hour ultimatum pressed harder on Cole's shoulders. Inside, the fire crackled. Cole settled onto the worn sofa, Harbor leaping gently beside him while Whisper curled between them. Cole pulled out his phone, hesitated, then opened the short video he had recorded 2 days prior. The moment Harbor broke free from Laura Bennett's grasp and sprinted to shield Whisper, it still made his breath catch. The world needed to see that. He uploaded the clip to a rescue forum, then shared it with a message typed more from instinct than intent. These two won't survive being torn apart. If you know anyone willing to adopt both, please reach out before New Year's. He didn't expect much. He rarely expected anything anymore. Within minutes, the post began gaining traction. By the time Cole finished preparing breakfast for the dogs, notifications flooded his screen. Comments, shares, reposts, tags. Dozens of messages poured in, then hundreds. People cried over Harbor's devotion, over Whisper's brave struggle to follow her. Holiday emotions ran high, and stories like this struck the deepest chords. Yet every email, every inquiry that hit Cole's inbox shared the same tragic refrain. We can take Harbor, but we can't manage a blind pup. We'd love the golden retriever, but Whisper needs more than we can give. Could the shelter place the puppy elsewhere while Harbor gets a better chance at life? Hope swelled, then collapsed again with every message. Harbor nuzzled Whisper's ear, as if sensing the churn inside Cole. Later in the afternoon, he drove into town with the dogs. The lights strung across the streets glowed softly despite the lingering daylight. Blue lanterns, silver tinsel, and paper bells swaying in the breeze. Musicians were setting up at the stage for the New Year's Eve celebration, tuning guitars and testing microphones. Cole stepped into the clinic carrying Whisper, while Harbor walked closely at his side. Eleanor Hayes greeted him with a gentle smile. Today, she wore a deep forest green sweater under her white coat. Her silver hair fell in loose waves around her face. You look tired, she observed softly. Didn't sleep. Cole set Whisper gently on the floor, Harbor immediately lying beside him like a living shield. Eleanor motioned for him to join her in the small break room. They sat opposite each other at a table scattered with holiday cookies wrapped in plastic. Cole stared at his hands. I posted a video, he said, of what happened with Harbor. I saw it, Eleanor said. The whole town saw it. It's beautiful. He let out a humorless laugh. Beautiful, but pointless. Everyone wants Harbor alone. Eleanor rested a hand lightly over his. You did the right thing sharing it, Cole. He didn't answer. Silence stretched until Eleanor spoke again. Her tone softer, deeper. There's something you've been carrying. Something heavier than this decision. Cole flinched. He tried to hide it, but Eleanor didn't miss much. Her eyes, gentle and steady, urged honesty. Not the kind demanded, but the kind offered. It was last New Year's Eve, Cole began. His voice was rough, scraped raw by memory. My unit was stationed overseas. Quiet night. Too quiet. We shouldn't have let our guard down. Eleanor listened, still as snowfall. We were preparing a small celebration, he continued. Holiday music on a radio. Someone had found a string of lights. He swallowed. Then an IED went off near the entrance. My best friend, David, was closest. He paused, breath shuddering. I couldn't reach him in time. I held him, but... Cole's throat tightened. He died before midnight, before the new year. We were supposed to go home together. Eleanor didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her gaze held the sorrow of someone who had once knelt beside a man she'd loved as he slipped beyond reach. "That's why I don't get close to anything anymore," Cole whispered. "I can't do another goodbye. Not again." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "Loving something doesn't guarantee losing it, Cole. And losing someone doesn't mean you stop deserving connection. David wouldn't want you carrying his death as a reason to step away from life." Cole closed his eyes as her words sank in. "Harbor and Whisper aren't asking you to forget pain," Eleanor said. "They're asking you to choose hope, despite it." A sound came from the hallway. Harbor's soft bark. Whisper had wandered slightly, nose pressed to the air, searching for her. Harbor guided him with quiet grunts until he found her again. Cole watched from the break room door. "They're teaching you something," Eleanor murmured. He knew she was right. When Cole returned home that evening, his inbox was overflowing. He scrolled through message after message, hope rising and falling like ocean waves. Harbor only. Harbor only. Harbor only. Midnight approached, and he felt his chest hollow. But then, just as he prepared to close his laptop, one subject line caught his eye. "We can take both." His breath hitched. The email was from a couple in Maine. "We once raised a blind dog," the message began. "We know the patience it takes and the joy it brings. We also have a small bell, a guide bell. If Harbor wears it, Whisper will always know where she is. We'd love to welcome them both." Cole read the message twice, then a third time. The couple described their quiet home by the coast, their experience with special needs animals, their willingness to drive across states to meet the dogs. He felt something warm flicker in his chest, fragile at first, then blooming with quiet strength. Hope. For the first time in weeks, the ache inside him eased. Not vanished, but softened, like snow, melting beneath the first touch of sunlight. Harbor nudged his hand. Whisper pressed into her side. Cole whispered aloud, almost reverently, "Maybe your future's finally coming together." The cabin felt warmer than ever before, filled with the soft breath of two lives whose fate might finally change. He let out a long, trembling exhale. Hope had a sound after all. It sounded like a small bell in Maine, waiting to guide a blind pup home. Snow drifted gently over Willow Bend as evening settled in, softening the edges of rooftops and turning the town square into something out of a winter painting. Lanterns glowed silver and pale blue along the ice rink, casting reflections that shimmered like moving stars. The crowd had begun to gather for the countdown, children skating clumsily, couples sipping hot cocoa, elders wrapped in wool coats sharing quiet laughter. The air carried a festive hum, but for Cole Harrison, every sound felt distant beneath the weight of what tonight meant. He walked toward the clinic with Harbor trotting close to his side, her tail swaying in slow, calm arcs. Whisper pressed so tightly against her that their steps moved almost as one. Harbor guiding by touch, Whisper following by faith. The small bell the couple from Maine had sent ahead of their arrival jingled lightly on Harbor's collar, its gentle chime threading through the cold air like a promise. When Cole stepped into the clinic lobby, he saw them immediately. The couple from Maine stood near the reception desk, stamping melted snow from their boots. They were older, late 60s, perhaps early 70s, and carried themselves with the quiet steadiness of people who had weathered storms together. The woman was petite and soft-featured, her hair a snow-white halo, falling just to her shoulders. Her skin held the gentle creases of someone who smiled often, and her blue-gray eyes sparkled with warmth. She wore a long knitted coat in a muted shade of evergreen. The man beside her was taller, broad-shouldered despite age, with a weathered jawline softened by a neatly trimmed gray beard. His hands were calloused, hinting at years of woodworking or sailing. His eyes, deep brown and thoughtful, moved with the calm deliberation of someone who observed before speaking. His flannel-lined jacket hung open, revealing a wool sweater the color of driftwood. Eleanor stepped forward, smiling. "Cole, these are the Winters, Ruth and Samuel. They drove all the way from Maine." Ruth Winters approached first, her expression brightening when she spotted Harbor and Whisper. "Oh my," she whispered, kneeling carefully despite her stiff joints. "You two are even more beautiful than the video showed." Harbor walked toward Ruth without hesitation. The bell chimed. Whisper followed, nose raised as he traced the air around this unfamiliar presence. Ruth extended her hands slowly, giving the dogs time to understand her. Whisper hesitated just for a second before bumping his tiny nose into her palm. Ruth's face broke into a trembling smile. "Hello there, little one." Samuel approached with a gentleness surprising for his large frame. He removed one glove, letting Harbor sniff his hand. She pressed her head against his thigh with soft certainty, the telltale sign of a dog offering trust. Samuel's voice was low, warm. "She's telling us she approves." Cole watched the scene unfold with a tightness in his chest he wasn't prepared for. For weeks, he had carried the fear of losing them. And now, seeing how naturally they responded to this couple, something inside him loosened. Eleanor guided them to a quieter examination room where the meeting could unfold without interruption. Harbor moved slowly, her bell chiming as she adjusted her pace so Whisper could track her movements. The pup stumbled once, bumping lightly into a chair leg before reorienting himself at the sound of the bell. Ruth made a soft sound of sympathy but didn't interfere. She let Whisper figure it out, showing a patient understanding Cole hadn't seen from anyone else. When Harbor finally reached Samuel again, she rested her head against his knee, releasing a soft huff that felt like a sigh of relief. Samuel placed a steady hand atop her head. "She's protective," he said quietly, "and brave." Cole nodded. She kept him alive, even when she barely had strength left herself. Ruth turned her gaze up to Cole, her eyes glistening. "Some bonds are chosen long before we understand them." Whisper, guided by the chime of Harbor's bell, followed her as she stepped back slightly. His nose brushed Ruth's hand again, and he let out a tiny, almost imperceptible sound, half question, half greeting. Ruth's breath caught. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "We can help you. We truly can." The room fell into a gentle quiet. The Winters didn't rush, didn't push. Their movements were soft, paced, full of the kind of empathy that could only come from experience. For the first time, Cole saw a future where Harbor and Whisper might not just be tolerated, they might thrive. Outside, laughter from the ice rink echoed faintly through the walls. The town was preparing for its countdown celebration. Lights flickered like silver snowfall, and music drifted into the clinic. Cheerful, bright, full of anticipation. Inside, the moment felt suspended, weightless. Samuel looked at Cole with sincerity that struck something deep. "Mr. Harrison," he said, "we know what it means to care for an animal that depends on you completely. We had a blind dog named Willow for 12 years. His eyes softened with memory. She taught us patience. She taught us how to listen. We're ready to do that again. with both of them. Ruth nodded, placing a hand over her husband's. If you'll trust us with them? Cole felt Harbor lean gently against his leg. Whisper curled beneath her chest. Their warmth spread through his jeans like a pulse. He knelt beside them, stroking Whisper's soft fur. The pup tilted his head, searching for Harbor until her bell rang again. Whisper sighed and settled. Cole swallowed hard. This was the moment he'd been fearing and longing for in equal measure. I think, he said quietly, you're exactly who they've been waiting for. Ruth's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. Samuel nodded once, solemnly, as if accepting a sacred responsibility. Eleanor reappeared with the final paperwork, but paused when she saw the scene. Harbor resting one paw over Whisper's tiny back, the Winters watching with tender awe, Cole kneeling on the floor with his heart in his eyes. No one spoke. Outside, a voice from the town square began the countdown sound test. 10, 9, 8. Cole exhaled, looked down at the dogs, and nodded. Harbor and Whisper, together, stepped into their new life just as Willow Bend prepared to welcome the new year. Spring arrived in Willow Bend like a long-awaited exhale. The snow that had blanketed the hills for months melted into clear water that trickled softly through the woods behind Cole Harrison's cabin. The pines, once weighed down with frost, shook free their winter burden and shimmered under warming sunlight. Cole stood on his porch in a flannel shirt and worn jeans, watching bluebirds dart between branches, their wings flashing in the soft morning glow. Something in him, quiet and tentative, felt lighter too. It had been nearly 3 months since Harbor and Whisper had left with the Winters. 3 months since he'd knelt on the clinic floor and watched 2 small lives choose their future with a conviction that put his own fear to shame. He had wondered, more than once, whether he should have kept them, whether letting them go had been another kind of loss. But each time that doubt surfaced, he remembered the way Harbor had leaned into Samuel's hand, the way Whisper had brushed his tiny nose against Ruth's palm, and how the bell on Harbor's collar had chimed like a blessing as they left. Now, standing beneath the gentle warmth of spring sunlight, Cole accepted that not all goodbyes were endings. Some were gateways, quiet thresholds leading to new beginnings. His phone buzzed in his pocket. When he glanced at the screen, a familiar name appeared, Ruth Winters. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Something small, something real. He opened the message. A video began to play. The image showed a backyard alive with spring. Grass rippling in a soft breeze. A maple tree budding with tiny leaves. Sunlight glinting across a neat wooden fence. Ruth's voice narrated gently from behind the camera. Thought you might like to see how well they're doing. Harbor trotted into frame first, her golden fur now thick and healthy, glowing in the sunlight like polished honey. She had grown stronger, not just physically, but in spirit. Her posture was confident, her steps purposeful. Around her neck, the tiny silver bell chimed with each movement, its sound bright and warm. A moment later, Whisper appeared at the edge of the screen, moving cautiously across the grass. He had grown too. Longer legs, sturdier paws, a coat sleek and glossy. But his eyes remained pale and unfocused, fixed somewhere between light and shadow. He paused, listening. Harbor stopped walking and turned her head slightly, allowing the bell to ring. Whisper's ears perked. He moved forward, bumping once into a patch of uneven dirt, but quickly correcting his direction. His nose lifted, sampling Harbor's scent carried through the spring wind. Step by careful step, he made his way toward her, tail wagging in trust. Cole's chest tightened, not with pain, but with something closer to gratitude. As Whisper finally reached Harbor, he pressed his face gently into her shoulder, releasing a soft, contented sigh. Harbor responded by lowering her head and resting it against his back. A gesture of quiet reassurance. The video ended, but another began automatically. This time, the Winters sat on the grass with the dogs. Ruth wore a light blue sweater and loose cream slacks, her snow-white hair catching the sunlight like spun silk. She had a peaceful elegance, delicate hands, small gold earrings, the kind of face shaped by decades of kindness. Samuel sat beside her, solid and dependable, in a dark green vest over a plaid shirt. His silver beard caught the breeze, and his deep brown eyes glimmered with steady affection. Ruth reached out and traced Harbor's collar. The bell tinkled. "You were right," she said softly to the camera. "These two weren't meant to be apart." Samuel chuckled. "If anything, they run this house now." Harbor let out a gentle bark as if to confirm the statement. Whisper, following the sound, waddled closer and climbed half into Samuel's lap. Samuel supported him with careful hands, his movements slow and mindful. "We also wanted to thank you," Ruth continued, "for trusting us with them. They've brought a kind of warmth back into our home we didn't know we were missing." The video ended on a frame of the two dogs curled together beneath the budding maple tree, Harbor's head resting protectively over Whisper's small body. Cole replayed it twice before putting the phone away. His heartbeat felt steadier than it had in years. Inside the cabin, he dressed for work. Simple flannel, jeans, boots, and drove into town. The veterinary clinic had become something of a second home to him since January. Eleanor had offered him a part-time position after seeing his patience with anxious animals and his ability to calm even the most frightened strays. And he had surprised himself by accepting. When he walked into the clinic today, Eleanor looked up from the reception desk. She wore a light pink blouse beneath her lab coat, and her silver gray hair framed her face in soft waves. A kind smile lifted her features. "You look rested," she noted. "I got a video," Cole said, unable to hide his grin. "Ah," she replied, eyes brightening. "How are our wanderers?" "Happy, growing." Whisper's getting braver. Harbor's doing her Harbor thing. Eleanor chuckled, always leading the way. Throughout the morning, Cole assisted with appointments. A limping beagle, a parrot with a missing feather patch, a grumpy tabby who refused to leave his carrier. His movements were steady, practiced. The townspeople had grown used to seeing him here. Some greeted him warmly. Others offered brief nods of respect. Each small interaction stitched him more firmly into the fabric of Willow Bend. Around noon, the clinic received a call from the town's community center. They were organizing a small rescue training workshop and asked if Cole would help demonstrate animal safety for volunteers. Eleanor looked at him with raised eyebrows. "You should do it," she said. "You're good at this." Cole hesitated, but didn't refuse outright. "Maybe," he said, a word he couldn't have imagined saying months earlier. When his shift ended, he walked through the square, which was beginning to blossom with spring decorations. Children played in the melting snowbanks. Neighbors talked over fences. The town felt alive. And for the first time, Cole felt he belonged among them. That evening, back at his cabin, his phone buzzed again. Another video. This one was different. It showed Harbor standing alone beneath the full spring sun, her fur rippling like golden wheat. The bell around her neck chimed lightly in the breeze. A moment later, Whisper appeared from behind a tree, stepping forward, ears tilted toward the sound. He moved with more confidence now, less trembling, more purpose. When he reached Harbor, he lifted his head and rested it gently against her shoulder, their old ritual unchanged. Ruth's voice narrated softly, not the eyes that see the light, but the heart that knows where home is. Cole's breath caught, a warmth unfurled inside him, quiet, deep, true. He smiled. A new year had truly begun, for Harbor, for Whisper, and, in a way he hadn't expected, for him. In the end, the story of Harbor and Whisper is more than a tale of two fragile lives saved in the cold. It is a reminder that miracles rarely arrive with thunder or trumpets. They come quietly, in the form of small footsteps following a gentle bell, in the warmth of a hand offered at the right moment, in the grace that guides us toward one another when we are lost. Many call it chance, some call it fate, but those who have felt it know that it is something greater, something touched by God's own compassion moving through ordinary days. It is the same quiet mercy that lifts a weary veteran, the same light that helps a blind pup find his way, the same love that reaches us when we believe we are beyond reaching. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that goodness still chooses us. Leave a comment telling where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel so these messages of hope can continue to find others in the dark. May God bless you, guide your steps, and keep you warm through every winter of your life.